Revealed, the incredible truth behind 14 months of 40% paycheck demands that changed everything. Jake sat on the worn-out porch of his childhood home, the same chipped wood that had witnessed countless seasons of laughter and life unraveling. His fingers fidgeted with the edges of the pink slip tucked in his back pocket, weightier than any summer storm threatening to break. He had stepped into his boss's office a man fulfilled, only to leave as a casualty, his dreams scattered like leaves across Cedarville's endless skies. He was 35, an architect once respected and now a father teetering on the brink of despair. The laughter of his daughter echoed from the backyard, a stark reminder of the innocence he longed to shield. Bills were stacking up inside, mocking him, bills that highlighted his inadequacy, his supposed failure. How could he explain this to her? How could he face the disappointed look in his wife's eyes? Hard work, loyalty, resilience, the very values his family stressed seemed to vanish before the cruel reality he now faced. As he scrolled through job boards, each listing felt more like a punch than a prospect. The weight of financial insecurity tightened its grip, suffocating him. Beneath the desperation was a flicker of audacity. Could he start his own design firm? Memories flashed of late nights sketching ambitious designs, fueled by passion and the relentless hum of possibility. Yet, he hesitated. He needed funding and the audacity to demand 40% paychecks from his clients, a figure that raised eyebrows in Cedarville. Would this boldness brand him as foolish? Internal conflict churned like a storm inside him. Years of striving for respectability clashed with the idea of going against the grain. What if they laughed at him? Yet, the alternative, remaining stagnant in a system that had discarded him, felt even more unacceptable. But a dark shadow lingered just beyond his resolve. A client had spat scornfully about his humble beginnings, making him question everything he had learned about perseverance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The night drew closer, and as shadows danced around him, Jake rummaged through his late grandfather's belongings, searching for solace. Instead, he found dusty documents hinting at an old family property, ripe with potential. Heart racing, he felt a glimmer of hope. With renewed determination, he envisioned using that property to launch his firm if he could just gather the courage to ask others for help, to leverage support. His wife and daughter offered unwavering belief, an anchor in the chaos. Then came Claire, a savvy entrepreneur with an infectious energy who sparked something in him that had long lain dormant. They connected over coffee, brainstorming ideas that ignited the flame of ambition within him. But as his resolve strengthened, an icy call from his former employer shattered his confidence, an alluring offer laced with betrayal. Jake stood at the precipice of decision, with his future tangled in complexity. Could he betray his principles and return to the very place that had upended his life? The answer, like a storm on the horizon, loomed heavy. As he closed his eyes, conflicted, a haunting sense of inevitability settled over him. Would he burn his bridges for a second chance or forge ahead on uncertain, yet principled paths? Whatever lay ahead was the crossroads of his existence, a gamble for vindication or despair, with everything at stake. The dawn pierced through the remnants of night, illuminating the complexities painted across Jake's struggling soul. He pushed himself off the creaking porch and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill him with a fragile determination. The old family property, his potential sanctuary, loomed in his mind like a beacon as he debated whether to take the plunge into self-employment or crawl back to the familiar embrace of a disbanded loyalty. With a handful of sketches tucked under his arm, Jake made his way to the old property. It stood defiant, its wooden beams weathered but familiar. Each step brought clarity, urging him to confront the fears that clung to him. An empty canvas awaited, one he could mold with his own ambitious spirit, but the shadows of doubt danced just out of sight. Sitting on the empty plot where dreams could flourish, his mind churned with ideas. He envisioned a space that would foster creativity, a design firm that would challenge the muck of conventional expectations. But petrifying questions plagued him. Could he gather clients willing to invest in his radical vision of 40% paychecks? Could he convince them that quality came at a price? Each thought was a pulse of anxiety. The laughter of his daughter rang in his ears, grounding him. Could he really step into an unknown world driven by his own aspirations? The weight of expectations flared inside, battling against the fragile embers of ambition. They'll see me as a fool, he mused, fighting the swelling tide of hesitation. What if he failed? What if this dream crumbled like the chips of paint on his grandfather's porch? Yet, at the heart of the turmoil lay a quiet anger, a resolve forged in adversity. The betrayal from his former employer festered, a betrayal that lit a fire under his skin. Returning to a place that had belittled him felt like surrendering to a defeat he could not abide. The choice still hovered before him, a tantalizing thread between the past he knew and the unknown he craved. He thumbed through the sketches, rustic buildings honorably designed, each lined with proportions that told the story of his experiences. This was more than architecture. It was his statement, his voice in a world that had crammed him into a box. Perhaps the hesitation had been divine, a test to reshape his vision. The more he pondered, the more the idea morphed into a lurking possibility. What if he owned his worth? Fueled by newfound energy, he reached for his phone, dialing Claire. She answered on the second ring, her voice eager and open. "Ready to dive into this, Jake?" she asked, and in her tone, he sensed the undertones of belief that transcended mere friendliness. "I think I'm ready," he replied, his heartbeat syncing with a rhythm of impending transformation. They began discussing the logistics, the gritty details that formed a saturated framework around his dream. As thoughts flowed, he found himself immersed in a newfound excitement. The idea had legs, and he was prepared to set it in motion. As they exchanged ideas, his vision solidified. They mapped out strategies, touching on marketing strategies and networking. Jake felt a sense of empowerment, an awakening that tickled the corners of his self-doubt. Change, once a daunting specter, transformed into a promising venture. But even as Jake hung up, a lingering thought shackled him. What if he couldn't convince others to see his vision? The responses from potential clients danced through his mind with unsettling clarity. The shadows of the past rushed back, threatening to suffocate his ambitions. Even with belief bolstering him, the fear of rejection loomed over his head like a thundercloud. Jake breathed deeply, contemplating the duality of potential and fear. The moment he so carefully awaited was approaching. Now was the moment to harness every experience, every doubt, and mold them into something that could defy his past. Would he embrace the exhilarating unknown and challenge the norms with his design firm idea, or would fear get the best of him, compelling him to retreat? The path forward shimmered with possibility, yet at its cusp lay a fear he could no longer ignore. The moment of truth approached, heavy with the weight of his desires. As the sun climbed higher, casting an invigorating glow across the dilapidated property, Jake felt a strange yearning, a collision of hope and dread. The clarity he'd brushed against yesterday possessed a new intensity that threatened to ground him or propel him forward with equal ferocity. In his mind, a bustling design firm, alive with collaboration and innovation, beckoned, craving to be birthed into reality. But could he summon the courage to face the transformative journey ahead? The sketches remained clutched tightly in his fist, remnants of a dream unimplemented. Each line represented not just structures but the potential for catharsis, a chance to redefine himself in a space he owned rather than borrowed. The fear that lingered inside was unmistakable. It was the specter of rejection carefully interwoven with the exhilarating promise of liberation. Jake understood that true freedom required a leap, a dive into both the creative abyss and the harsh economic realities of self-employment. Gathering the courage he needed, he slipped into a local cafe armed with his sketches and a notepad, a makeshift command center for his first strategies. There was a stirring energy in the air, fellow entrepreneurs hustled nearby, their conversations peppered with enthusiasm. Observing them ignited the dormant flame within Jake. He was not alone, a community thrived on ambition. His first task was to list potential clients who might resonate with his audacious vision. As he jotted down names of local influencers and small business owners, a whisper of self-doubt clawed at the edges of his determination. What made him think they'd be interested in a radical structure that challenged traditional compensation? Focus on your passion, he muttered under his breath, punctuating his resolve with the stroke of his pen. The tactile sensation of writing offered a much-needed tether amidst the chaotic sea of uncertainties. Meeting Claire for lunch later that day proved a pivotal moment. She listened intently, her supportive demeanor a balm for his anxiety. You have talent, Jake. Have you thought about leveraging social media to showcase your designs? Build your brand before the big pitch? The concept hit him like a bolt of lightning. It was not only about offering a service but also about crafting an identity, a dual narrative that reflected his mastery and ambition. In his mind, he started to envision posts, images of his designs illuminating the screen, sharing both the aesthetic and the emotional journey that shaped his work. He could invite potential clients into his world, not just sell them a service. Yet, as the plan began to solidify, the specter of vulnerability loomed large. The moment he pressed post on a design, he would unveil aspects of himself that felt perilously raw. What if a world that had doubted him before dismissed his efforts again? Taking that plunge became a juxtaposition of excitement and fear, the dichotomy of aspiration against past failures flickering in his mind like a cruel mirage. The conversation with Claire flowed effortlessly, unveiling details of networking strategies and pitching his concepts in casual settings rather than formal meetings. As they spoke, he realized these opportunities were less about the architecture itself and more about the narrative that enveloped every design, stories of resilience and creativity, the essence of his journey. I'll give it a shot, he said as they wrapped up their lunch. The weight of his decision settled deep in his chest, a deliberate move towards authenticity, but before he could fully embrace that freedom, a persistent anxiety gnawed at him, a treacherous undercurrent reminding him of the risks ahead. The landscape he was about to navigate was uncharted and fraught with potential pitfalls. The day dissolved into a succession of preparations. As dusk approached, he stood before the mirror, a frightening reflection of hope and vulnerability staring back. This was his moment, but the accumulation of what-ifs taunted him, a relentless chorus of discouragement. Whispering doubts into his psyche. Jake had to confront those fears head-on. Would he dare to expose his vision to the very people that had once overlooked him? Or would he retreat into the shadows, dictated by the intimidation of potential rejection? The answer awaited him, concealed beneath the surface of his apprehension. The next day, he would take the first step. The challenge lay in maintaining the audacity to rise above the doubt that had once dictated his life. Tomorrow would not just be about presenting designs, it would be about claiming his identity. But a pivotal encounter awaited just around the corner, one that would test the very essence of that resolve. Jake woke early the next morning, the sun barely illuminating the edges of his sketches spread across the table. He stared at the designs, grappling with the weight of the promises implicit in each line. Today would be the moment he claimed not just his identity but his potential. Just the idea of sharing his vision sent a tremor of anxiety coursing through him, but it also ignited a flicker of determination. After a quick breakfast, he took a deep breath and opened social media on his phone. The vibrant images from successful designers flooded his feed, work that had carved niches in the industry. He felt a hint of envy flaring up, but he steered that energy toward his own burgeoning vision. What made their stories resonate was not just the visuals but the embodiment of their creativity played out on a public stage. That was the missing piece for him, a component of his journey that he had yet to embrace. With his heart racing, he crafted an introductory post, detailing his architectural philosophy and vision. Words danced across the screen: community-driven design, sustainability, a departure from the rigid norms that stifled creativity. He referenced influences that shaped him, adding depth to his narrative. Each click of the keyboard felt like a step onto a tightrope, a precarious balancing act of authenticity and fear. Before he could second-guess himself, he pressed post. A wave of adrenaline surged through him, quickly replaced by a sinking feeling, a sudden realization that the world now had access to his most vulnerable creation. What followed was a flood of notifications. Likes and comments blurred into a haze of validation and doubt. Some remarks were encouraging, while others, predictably, were critical. Each notification swung open another door of self-doubt, drafting familiar enemies from the depths of his mind. The critics knew his shortcomings well. The previous failures he had fought to escape were now whispering in his ear again. Yet amidst the apprehensions, a productive energy took hold. He organized meetings with local business owners, setting up casual coffee chats instead of formal presentations. Each meeting became an opportunity to show not just his designs but to share the values behind them, where his passion lay. Jake felt himself transitioning. He was no longer just a designer seeking approval but a storyteller offering a vision, a collaborative experience. The clarity he found within those conversations steadily chipped away at his fears. Every person with whom he spoke added new layers to his identity and reinforced the narrative he envisioned. But as quickly as his confidence soared, it could crumple under the weight of a misinterpreted comment or a missed opportunity. One afternoon, as he shuffled through sketches, he noticed a vicious thread below one of his posts, mocking his radical approach. The urge to retreat, to hide his work from the world, clawed at him. Would he let the opinions of a few dictate his path? Jake took a moment, closing his eyes to gather himself. He thought of Claire's unwavering support and the thrill of his architectural dreams. The fiery ambition ignited within those early meetings began to crystallize into a palpable need to not just exist in the industry but to reshape it. In those moments, empowerment and vulnerability intertwined. He had to confront the critics, not as foes but as challenges to redefine his resilience. The night descended with layers of contemplation. Jake sat with his notepad, now all too familiar, synthesizing what he had learned into actionable strategies. He began drafting a proposal for a project he believed would embody his teachings, a space that would reflect his passion and evoke transformative experiences. As he concluded his reflection, a sudden notification popped up on his phone, a message from a local influencer who had seen his post. "Let us collaborate and create something that challenges the norms." It was an invitation, a test of his courage, a brink of his aspirations. Could he rise to meet this new challenge, or would he dodge another opportunity for growth? Whatever lay ahead, it was now time to embrace not just the designs or the conversations but the very essence of who he was becoming, as a creator and as a resilient architect. But first, there was a face-to-face meeting looming that night, and in the back of his mind, an unsettling question lingered. What if this was the break he needed, or would it all come crashing down like his past attempts? The cafe buzzed with activity, the air thick with the rich aroma of coffee and the low murmur of conversations. Jake arrived early, his mind racing with thoughts of what this collaboration might mean for his journey. Polishing his sketches, he attempted to quell the restlessness gnawing at him. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an opportunity to potentially redefine his place in the architectural landscape. As he waited, Jake's phone vibrated with another notification alert. A new comment on his social media post had appeared. He hesitated before checking, the familiar pang of anxiety tightening his chest. There it was again, a message laced with skepticism, a needy approach to validation. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself he was stepping out of the shadows, bearing his vision to the world. With that thought, he tossed his phone into his bag, focusing on the larger goal. Following the dull tick of the clock looming above, every second that passed fueled his anticipation. The reminder of Claire's words echoed in his mind, every great journey begins with uncertainty. Embrace it. A figure entered the cafe, cutting through the sea of faces. She was striking confident, with artwork on her clothing that screamed individuality. Her name was Mia, the influencer who had reached out. She strode towards him, her energy unmistakable, and before they exchanged pleasantries, a spark ignited within him. He felt it, this meeting could be more than a chance encounter, it was a pivotal moment in his growth. They settled into a corner table, the din of the cafe fading slightly as their conversation flowed. Mia began outlining her vision, speaking passionately about creativity and the need for disruptive designs that challenged traditional norms. As Jake listened, he couldn't help but feel a connection. Her fervor echoed his own aspirations. He leaned forward, excitement emerging from within. What if we create a community space that integrates nature with urban living? A design that makes people rethink how they interact with their environment? The very idea sent electricity through him. He could visualize how this project could reflect his philosophies, a sanctuary that embraced sustainability. Mia nodded appreciatively, her eyes sparkling. That's exactly what we need. This project could resonate with so many, transforming narratives about urban living. For the first time, Jake felt understood. The moments of doubt, the whispers he fought daily, evaporated under the warmth of collaborative fire. This was not just about shapes and structures anymore, it was about impacting lives, offering experiences. In that exchange, Jake discovered a hidden competency, the ability to craft built environments that breathed life, that could narrate stories. However, alongside this emerging idea was a lurking doubt: what if his vision was too radical for a commercial project? Would the markets accept it, or would it succumb to ridicule, just as before? As their conversation continued, Jake wrestled with these conflicting thoughts. His heart raced at the prospect of vulnerability, exposed to criticism yet again, but he reminded himself that true innovation came from courage. How could he encourage others to embrace their unique identities if he wasn't willing to embody his fully? Toward the end of their meeting, Mia leaned back, a contemplative look crossing her face. Let us draft an outline. If we pitch this idea well, we could attract the right investors. What if we face pushback? Jake dared to voice the fear creeping back into his psyche. Mia smiled softly, a hint of challenge in her gaze. Only if we let it. We need to stand firm, redefine our narrative. Besides, every visionary faces resistance. Her words struck a chord. Maybe this was the breaking point. He had been waiting for a chance to prove to himself that he could transform scrutiny into strength. As they left the cafe, the evening air felt charged with potential. Jake glanced at Mia, a shared determination sparking between them. He was ready to cast aside self-doubt and embrace vulnerability. Ready to step onto a larger stage. But lurking behind that confidence was an unsettling thought: what if this collaboration drew the attention of those who had criticized him, turning admiration into hostility? As they walked towards the horizon, a new question formed in his mind: would he be prepared for the scrutiny that success might attract? The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time, Jake felt genuinely ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. The very essence of his being as an architect was about to be put to the ultimate test. Jake awoke the next morning, his mind a tapestry of vivid thoughts colored by the previous day's conversation. The sun cast long shadows across his desk, illuminating sketches that felt both familiar and alien. He could see the glimmers of something greater shining through. This project with Mia was going to reshape his identity. But how much of it was wishful thinking? Gripping his coffee cup, he sipped slowly, savoring the rich bitterness that filled his senses. It was a small comfort, a grounding moment to fight against the whirlwind in his head. Yet as he replayed Mia's enthusiasm, excitement coursed through him like an electric current, reminding him that stepping beyond his comfort zone was a necessity for growth. With determination thrumming in his chest, he opened his laptop. The first thing he encountered was a slew of notifications demanding his attention, each containing whispers of doubt or careless criticisms from anonymous voices scattered across social media. He felt his heart racing and pulled back, reminding himself of the energy from their meeting, a stark contrast to this negative tide. His intent to engage with the comments faltered. Instead, he focused on the outline they needed to develop. This was what mattered now. Time melted away as ideas poured out, each sketch layered with personal philosophy and potential. Articulating the integration of natural elements with city life, he became immersed in a flurry of creativity. Jake let himself envision the multifunctional space he had dreamt of, where green walls met urban infrastructure, and where creativity could thrive. But the invasive thoughts of past criticisms stealthily crept back as he paused to examine his progress. Would investors really see the value in something so unorthodox? Doubt reared its head within him, echoing the fear that Kyle, his once supportive mentor, had expressed the last time they spoke. Jake, remember that every design should serve a purpose. Don't let your visions take you too far away from practicality. Yet, as he stared down at the sketches outlining a bold vision, He felt a wave of defiance rise against that notion. Who decided what was too far? Why should he restrict the boundaries of his creativity based on someone else's perception of practicality? Resolved not to let the past chain him to doubt any longer, he snapped a picture of his sketches and sent them to Mia. Immediately, he was struck by a violent mix of exhilaration and anxiety. He had shared the essence of himself. This was a pivotal moment, but what if the next message revealed that she didn't resonate with his vision? Tables turned faster than anticipated. His phone buzzed with a reply. Mia's enthusiasm leapt off the screen as she praised the sketches, suggesting revisions that would amplify their message. It was as if her words wiped away layers of worry. Their collaboration now felt like a dance instead of a battle. Yet, amidst the thrill of validation lingered the urgency of the next steps. They needed to secure funding, draft a detailed proposal, and more importantly, refine their pitch until it shone like a beacon. The looming fear of rejection was not gone, but it morphed into something else. It was a challenge. As he reworked their outline, something inside him rekindled a spark he had thought extinguished, a passion for storytelling through design that could reshape lives. His early sketches were not merely spaces, they were narratives filled with purpose and identity. Later that evening, with Mia on a video call, they perfected their pitch, their synergy evident in every exchanged idea. Yet the specter of criticism still loomed large in the back of Jake's mind. His defenses wavered as they discussed how to present their vision to investors. How could he stand firmly when the stakes felt so high? "Jake, remember, it's our story to tell," Mia reassured him, her confidence catching fire in his heart once more. "They're not just investing in buildings, they're investing in new thoughts." The truth of her words struck him, igniting a fresh determination. This was not solely about the architecture, it was about their ability to reshape perspectives. But what would happen when they faced the inevitable pushback? Still haunted by memories of past criticism, Jake felt the tension build. They were venturing into a world where opinions clashed, each moment fraught with the weight of expectation. As they ended the call, Jake stared blankly at the sketches strewn about his desk, a whirlwind of ideas and doubt colliding. The critical moment was nearing, the pitch was set for tomorrow morning. Inspirational aspirations battled with the old, familiar fears. He needed clarity, but clarity eluded him as he met his own reflection in the window. Would he be able to fully embrace this journey, with all its risks? The sound of his phone ringing cut through his introspection. It was a message from Mia, and as he opened it, he braced for what could shift everything once again. Would this elevate them or threaten to pull him into the depths of his insecurities? One glimpse of her words, and Jake felt the deliberation of conflict storming within him. The real test was beginning, and he wasn't sure if it was too late to turn back. Jake stayed awake long into the night, staring at the bright screen of his computer. Doubt swirled in his mind, echoing the cruel chorus of his past encounters. Each ping of a notification sent chills down his spine, reminiscent of the early days when he felt like an imposter in his own life, an architect still searching for his voice amid a cacophony of unsolicited judgments. The next morning arrived too soon, casting sharp rays that sliced through his window and illuminated the sketches scattered across his desk. Each of his designs was a potential pathway to success, yet they also held the weight of vulnerability. They represented this newfound collaboration with Mia, a partnership that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As the clock ticked ever closer to their scheduled pitch, Jake dressed methodically, the ritual granting him a fleeting sense of control. He chose an outfit he thought would reflect professionalism while still allowing a glimpse of his true self, an artist with bones of steel wrapped in a layer of creativity. He studied himself closely in the mirror, searching for the determination he desperately wished to embody. When Jake arrived at the office, an undercurrent of tension filled the air. Colleagues bustled around him, yet he felt carved out from their reality. He exchanged brief greetings, the drumming of his heart pulsating louder than the ambient noise. The conference room loomed in front of him, a portal into a world where his dreams were either validated or dismantled piece by piece. Mia was already there, pacing slightly as he entered. She looked up, her expression a blend of nerves and resolve, and he immediately felt the shift in energy. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steadying him as a calming balm. For the most part, Jake replied, a half-smile breaking through his apprehension. Yet the truth simmered beneath. He was teetering on the edge of uncertainty. Let us tell them our story. He scanned the room as they set up their materials, sleek renderings of their ambitious project, bright and alive, waiting to take flight. The team of investors soon filed in, their faces unreadable masks of professionalism. As they began their presentation, Jake felt his earlier confidence begin to fade, whispering insecurities taking form before him like a specter. Mia led the discussion effortlessly, her passion igniting in the dim room, but as he opened his mouth to speak, doubt clawed at his insides. His throat felt constricted, words strangled by fear. Jake, Mia nudged him gently as she moved the visuals to display one of the sketches he had poured himself into. The next part is yours. Her eyes danced with encouragement, yet he noticed a flicker of concern there too. She was experiencing this moment as much as he was, and he could either rise or stumble together. Drawing a breath deep from the pit of his stomach, he began explaining the philosophy behind their vision. The words flowed from him at first, each description resonated with the emotion he hoped to convey. Jake found himself eluding the mold of practicality that had long haunted him, engaging with concepts of integration between nature and urban life. Yet midway through, a question broke through as if igniting a fuse beneath his feet. What studies do you have to validate your claims about the benefits of biophilic design? One of the investors lobbed coldly. A guttural panic surged through him. Their market research wasn't as extensive as they had aimed for. They had prioritized creativity over cold, hard data. Doubt coiled tightly around his chest once again. Just then, a flicker of realization illuminated his mind. The innate connection humans held with nature was a truth transcending numbers. It was a narrative about empathy, experiences, and environments. While we may not have exhaustive studies, Jake began, each word now feeling like a declaration rather than a defense, what we do possess is a vision that resonates with collective well-being. His own voice sparked conviction deep within. Spaces shouldn't just be functional, they should evoke feelings, foster community. Our designs are rooted in understanding how emotional landscapes shape human experiences. The small ripples of doubt from the investors began fading, curiosity etched on their faces. Jake continued, energized by the unexpected turn. They were no longer just discussing architecture, they were engaging in a dialogue about humanity. As the questions continued, Jake found himself increasingly confident, actively defying the ghosts of criticism that had held him back. Each answer forged a new piece of steadiness, an anchor in the storm he had feared would undo him. They may not have all the facts, but what they had was authenticity, a quality he realized was irreplaceable in their craft. When the pitch finally concluded, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had offered something raw and vital, not just plans for buildings, but possibilities for emotional reconnection. Yet, just as a sense of relief washed over him, a new wave of uncertainty crested at the horizon. They could very well be facing a pivotal decision from the investors who held significant influence. As they departed, Jake realized he had pushed further than he ever had before, but would it be enough? Mia turned to him, eyes brighter than he had ever seen them. I think we did it, she said with cautious enthusiasm. But what if they don't see it? What if we've miscalculated? His voice carried the weight of lingering concern. We've built a framework for conversation, she replied, her confidence undiminished. No matter how this turns out, this was our breakthrough. Jake nodded, the threads of uncertainty still weaving through him, but the experience had shifted something. He felt a latent strength burgeoning within, exciting and terrifying simultaneously. The moment had ignited sparks, showing him that he could indeed fuse creativity with understanding. As he stood there, uncertain yet emboldened, the next chapter awaited them, a waiting room filled with potential that would either open doors or seal their fates. One last glance at the conference room door solidified the unshakable truth that this was only the beginning. What awaited beyond those walls loomed large in his mind. But soon, as he would discover, there would be far more to confront than he anticipated. The critics were not just out there, they would emerge from the very shadows of his past. In the days that followed the pitch, the office buzzed with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Jake found himself oscillating between hope and trepidation, replaying the presentation in his mind like a broken record. Did his words resonate? Would the investors recognize the spark they ignited? It was impossible to focus on anything but the impending decision, a shadow looming over his every interaction. As the week wore on, Jake noticed a shift in the dynamics around him. Whispers filled the air as colleagues speculated about the possibility of funding. Conversations turned from mundane office tasks to a buzzing excitement about their project. For the first time, he glimpsed the enormity of what they were tapping into. The design wasn't just about buildings, it was about a vision that could change lives, elevate communities, and re-establish the bond between humanity and nature. Yet each moment of collective thrill was a chasm filled with his own question: could he genuinely hold on to this newfound confidence? The weight of collective expectation bore down upon him. He was no longer just Jake, the architect on the fringes. He was now part of a larger narrative, one with the potential for real impact. Mia's infectious enthusiasm helped keep his spirits buoyed. They spent evenings refining their pitch materials, making subtle yet impactful adjustments, and drafting follow-up communications they hoped would resonate with the investors. We might want to include more visuals that capture the emotional reactions of people interacting with biophilic designs, she suggested one night, her fingers gliding over the keyboard. Great idea, Jake replied, scribbling down her insights. It startled him how smoothly they worked together, their collaboration growing deeper like the roots of the trees they admired in nature. He realized he could take feedback not just as constructive criticism, but as fuel for his artistic expression. Each revision felt closer to crafting a narrative they could be proud of. But past shadows continued to flicker in his mind. A chance meeting with Aaron, an old colleague who had once crossed paths with him in the unforgiving world of design competitions, almost unraveled his resolve. Aaron approached him during a networking event, his demeanor casual yet his eyes piercing with ambition. "Jake, I heard about your pitch. Bold move, risking your neck with something so touchy-feely." Aaron smirked, the edge of his tone slicing deeper than intended. "I believe in the idea," Jake responded, his voice steadier than he felt. Yet internally, doubt rippled. Had he overstepped? Was he really ready to advocate for something so profoundly humanistic against the pragmatism that Aaron revered? "Good luck. You'll need it," Aaron replied, a dismissive wave offloading lingering judgments that gnawed at Jake's sense of self-worth. He steered away from that conversation, grappling with the tangled web of emotions that had woven through his ambition. Was he brave or foolish? There had always been comfort in the well-defined lines of practical architecture. Numbers and analytics provided a safety net that felt reassuring amidst uncertainty. But as he rejoined Mia, he felt the embers of determination ignite once again. He wanted to craft spaces that not only stood the test of time but also fostered connections that resonated within people. That evening, he stood before his sketches, marveling at what they signified. Each curve and line represented a bridge to something greater than himself. Suddenly, an email pinged on his phone, jolting him to attention. A meeting had been scheduled with the investors the next day. They had feedback. Anticipation mixed with dread coursed through him. Gathering the courage to approach yet another potential crossroads, he felt an adrenaline rush. This was at the moment to either affirm the evolution of not just his projects, but of himself. Would they recognize what lay beneath their designs? Could he convince them to see beyond aesthetics? Jake glanced at Mia, who was engrossed in her own preparations. The unspoken connection lingered between them, a tether of trust in the whirlwind of uncertainty. As powerful as their collaborative spirit felt, it wouldn't be enough if he couldn't transcend his lingering doubts. He had the chance to carve out his identity and create pathways of connection through architecture. The stakes had risen, and ultimately, it would come down to his readiness to confront the critics of his past, the internal ones and the external ones. Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation looming ahead. Tomorrow would be more than just another meeting, it would be a reckoning. And as he considered what lay ahead, he couldn't shake one resonant thought: what if his greatest challenge was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to pounce? Jacob's heart drummed against his ribcage as he arrived at the meeting space, an ordinary conference room transformed into an arena for his ambitions. The polished wood table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reflecting different facets of his anxiety. He squashed his restlessness, using the moment to absorb every detail. This was his battleground. The investors filtered in, exuding an air of authority that felt suffocating. He recognized them from the pitch, the sharp lines of their suits echoing the jagged fears in his mind. Each nod and sideways glance sent ripples of self-doubt through him. What if they had reconsidered? What if the enthusiasm had fizzled? What would he say if they questioned his vision again? The tightness in his throat threatened to choke him. Mia entered, a cascade of light amidst the structured decorum. Her presence calmed his racing thoughts. She shot him a smile, a small anchor amidst the sea of uncertainty. As they gathered for the presentation, he drew confidence from her, reminding himself of the nights they spent dissecting their ideas. He wasn't alone. The lead investor, a stern woman named Laura, adjusted her glasses, scanning the room before her gaze fell on Jake. "Let us hear what you've got for us today," she stated, her tone flat but expectant. Sensing the weight of the moment, he leaned forward. "Thank you for this opportunity." He steadied his breath, fighting the tremors in his hands. "We've rethought our initial presentation based on your feedback." Energy coursed through him as he began, channeling the collaboration he and Mia had curated into this coherent narrative. Gradually, he lost himself in the flow of his words. The way nature infused art, how architecture shaped human experience, and images of serene spaces where people thrived. He watched their expressions shift. Interest flickered in their eyes, strumming on the chords of hope that had been pinned deep within him. But lurking beneath the surface was that shadow of doubt, the haunting echo of Aaron's words. Touchy-feely. He wrestled with the urge to second-guess himself. Could he truly convince them that these emotional connections mattered in the cutthroat business of architecture? Midway through, Laura interrupted him. "But Jake, how do you measure the success of such an approach? Isn't it all subjective?" For a moment, the room felt like a confessional. The challenge ignited a defensive spark within him. "It is subjective, but at its core, it involves the community's response," he reclaimed with newfound fervor. "We can gather data on user experience, environmental impacts, emotional health areas where traditional metrics fail." Each word propelled him closer to a reality he yearned for, where architecture could intertwine both heart and functionality. As he spoke, he discovered a facet of himself he hadn't fully grasped before: the ability to entwine conviction with empirical support. The more he articulated, the more he embraced his dual identity as both artist and analyst. Was this the empowerment Mia had entrusted him with? The meeting coalesced into a dialogue, their questions fostering engagement instead of doubt. With every exchange, Jake felt the veneer of prudence recede. He was stepping out of the shadows. But the sting of uncertainty was not wholly dispelled. After the presentation concluded, there was a moment of tense silence. They exchanged glances, calculating their verdict. Although Jake articulated passion convincingly, would it be enough to alter perceptions? The lead investor finally spoke. "Your approach is unorthodox and risky." Her voice held a weight that sent shards of fear through him. "And yet, in an age demanding innovation, maybe it's what we need." Tentatively, he leaned into that sliver of hope. "Would you consider moving forward to a first prototype?" Their responses shifted into deliberation, but the air hung thick, electric with potential outcomes. Jake yearned for clarity and resolution, craving the outcome that could either make or break everything he had worked for. And yet, his mind couldn't shake. The feeling that the itch in his gut was possibly a precursor to something more significant. Was he genuinely ready to embrace what could follow? As the meeting reached an unsatisfactory stop, it became clear Jake had just taken the first step into uncharted territory. Now he had to confront the reality of whatever was waiting on the other side of this transformative threshold. What lay beyond this moment, beyond the investor's decision, could either validate his newfound courage or cascade him into a pit of deeper introspection. And as the decisions hung in the balance, the echoes of doubt whispered again. Was he prepared for the consequences, both good and bad? The potential tidal wave of change approached, promising to reshape not just his career but who he believed he could become. Days morphed into tense weeks, each filled with anticipation that simmered below the surface. Jake found himself constantly scrutinizing his phone, catching every ping with an eager heart, hoping it would bring news from the investors. The uncertainty was thick, curling around him like a shroud, feeding whispers of doubt. Had he done enough? Had his voice truly resonated? Finally, an email arrived that felt monumental, a precise moment poised to define his trajectory. The subject line glared at him from the screen: follow-up on biophilic design proposal. With every ounce of resolve and apprehension intertwined, he opened it. The words spilled forth, promising a meeting to discuss moving forward, flesh on the bones of their previous conversation. Jake felt a surge of exhilaration. This was more than just an opportunity, it was validation of his emerging identity as a creative force. He immediately texted Mia, her enthusiasm providing a jolt of energy alongside his own. "We've got a follow-up," he shared, the reality of their collaboration now blazing brighter than before. Little did he know, the real challenge was just on the horizon. As they entered the meeting room again, his heart raced, but this time, it was layered with anticipation rather than fear. The investors sat with their notepads, expressions guarded, but the air held a hint of eagerness drawn from change. Mia shot him a confident glance, grounding him as they set up for the discussion. Laura motioned for silence and paused, the air stilling as visual presentations hummed to life. As images flickered, pastel sketches melding with pristine photographs, they actively engaged the narrative Jake and Mia crafted, a web binding creativity with acute awareness of functionality. Seeing his vision come to life ignited a spark in him, reaffirming the value they had fought to convey. "You've set out a compelling case for the prototype," Laura stated, changing the course of the conversation. Jake listened, breath held tightly in his chest. "We want to move forward, with one condition." Each moment hung on her words, like ripe fruit awaiting the pluck. "We want to see measurable impacts mapped out. Can you commit to showing us a framework to evaluate the success?" The question echoed within Jake's mind. This was more than just a deal, it echoed his internal fears. Would the heart of his work withstand the scrutiny that quantification demanded? But as uncertainty rose within, a newfound confidence, one born from weeks of shifting perspectives and embracing vulnerability, struck through him. "Yes, we can establish metrics around community engagement, emotional resonance, and sustainability benchmarks," he replied, feeling the excitement rattle his voice. With every word, he recalled that pivotal moment in the first meeting, where emotion melded into data, shifting the narrative. Mia's eyes glimmered, a silent affirmation of their partnership. As the discussion continued, they fleshed out the metrics, asserting a deep understanding of not just design but also of human experience, which would serve to validate their project. The meeting concluded, filled with a renewed energy that mirrored the room. As they walked out, Jake experienced an unfamiliar sense of fulfillment, a feeling cultivated from collaboration, vulnerability, and the courage to establish who he was becoming, a creator of transformative spaces. In the days that followed, as they refined their proposal, Jake felt profound transformation course through him. The acceptance he sought from the world around him had begun to permeate internally. Embracing adversity had forged resilience that now guided him. He was no longer anxious about being seen as merely an architect but rather as a storyteller and a thinker ambitiously working to reshape connections between people and spaces. The weeks built towards the prototype unveiling. On the eve of the launch, nestled within the comforting chaos of preparation, Jake looked out of his window, the sunset painting a collage of orange and purple. Flashes of memories cascaded over him, the doubts, the rejections, the resurrection of faith through supportive connections, each chapter leading him here. When the unveiling day came, the feedback flooded in. The space they had created, teeming with live plants and designs that softened the harsh boundaries of urban existence, spoke convincingly not just to the investors but to the community that came to experience it. As visitors wandered through the space, the expressions of wonder on their faces solidified Jake's conviction this venture had not just redefined his career but had quickly grown into his legacy as an architect and creator. At the epicenter of it all, Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of anxiety dissipate. He had conquered not only the momentous fear of inadequacy but had transformed it into a resolve that shaped not only his professional identity but also his personal journey. Completing this prototype was his grand achievement. It was a manifestation of growth, a bridge from past limitations into expansive possibilities. He stood there, proud and grounded, a testament to resilience and ambition. The laughter of his daughter echoed through the vibrant halls of the space, a poignant reminder of the authentic journey that transcended every challenge. Jake smiled, realizing he had transformed his turmoil into triumph. As the day concluded, he found clarity in his purpose and source of fulfillment. His identity was no longer an echo of doubt but a vivid narrative of success, one that had redefined not just his work, but the very essence of who he was now and who he aspired to be. No longer just an architect clinging to remnants of fear, he had emerged as a force for change. If you felt this journey as intensely as Jake experienced it, you need to subscribe now to the channel. This is the moment to show your support for emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these powerful journeys reach those who need them. Comment your reactions and theories about this fulfilling resolution. You never know how your words might inspire another. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of personal overcoming. Your engagement helps spread this vital message.